Pretend not to be able to understand things and preach at people. It's a foundational falsehood. The reason I wrote the book about it is because there's a handful of falsehoods that the believer cannot admit. They will not admit that there are transitional species. It doesn't matter that you give the definition. It doesn't matter that you show all the proof. It doesn't matter that you show lists of them and show how they all fit and why they are all transitional. Because the believer is a believer. He's a make-believer. So he's going to plug his ears and close his eyes and scream, yeah, 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 I can't hear you, because he desperately needs to make believe something else. Well, the thing is that there's no curiosity. There's no interest in finding out the truth. There is believe what I told you because I told you, and if you don't believe what I told you, I will kill you. Okay, religion will say absolute proof, right? Absolute conviction, total. I know that I know that I know what I really don't know at all. Science actually knows, yet everything is theoretical, everything is tentative. Everything has to be based on prior evidence. Anything could potentially be disproved. There's a rule in science that you can never prove anything in the positive sense, period. We have to treat them as tentative in order to keep your mind open. Because when you start proclaiming absolute knowledge, now you've closed your mind to further correction.
Welcome to Gnostic, Informant, and today I'm joined by the notorious AronRa.
Aron, please.
AronRa. Apologize. I always do that. I'm horrible with names. The other day I was talking about the Iliad and the Odyssey, and I kept saying the Aeneid. It's the Aeneid. I kept getting corrected. I just do that all the time. But
yeah, I read something once that said that you don't criticize somebody when they mispronounce a word, because sometimes the mispronunciation means that they learned it by reading.
Thank you. I was thinking that in my head, like, hey, I read this all the time, but I never hear anyone else say it. Maybe that's why.
Yep.
I don't know. Today we're going to talk about evolution, science, young Earth, creationism, all that good stuff. And you wrote a whole book about this.
Yeah, I did. It's not within reach at the moment, but there's one over there.
But I'll show a graphic on the screen right now. And so right. Go check that out on Amazon if you haven't already. And let's just get into some questions. So right now in 2021, there's people who still think the Earth is 6,000 years, 6 or 7,000 years old, somewhere in between. Even when I was a Christian, I never really bought into that. I kind of just was like, okay, whatever. I'll just pretend to accept that. But it seemed a little ridiculous to me. What is the best evidence we have for the Earth being billions of years or hundreds of millions of years, whatever it is, and not 6,000 years old? What would you say?
Well, hundreds of years ago, there were a number of Christians who were all of the general consensus that, the Earth was so many thousands of years old, maybe 10,000 years old. Most people didn't imagine that it was any older than that. They really didn't pay a lot of attention to Bishop Ussher, who did, counting the begats in the Bible and all like that. I mean, there were people in one little corner of the world called Europe that bought into the biblical story, but, most of the rest of the world didn't.
Yeah.
Most of the rest of the world, however, had no concept of how old things were. If you were to talk to Hindus, for example, they say that a day of Brahma is 4.32 billion years old, which is remarkably close.
Yeah, I've heard this before. They have the Kali Yuga cycle.
Yeah. It's remarkably close to the age of the Earth.
Wow.
But it's still wrong. And it's also a day of Brahma. So this is like a cyclic kind of in existence. So there was some people who thought that, okay, the Earth is only a few thousand years old, and I know that this wall was built by the Romans in this year. We know exactly what year this wall was built, and it looks like utter crap. Why is this coming down? Why does it look so bad? Why is it so heavily eroded? We see all these other things that were built 200 or 300 years ago, and they look completely fine, but here's this thing from 2,000 years ago or 1,500 years ago, and it looks like utter shit. So they started working out that erosion has an effect. And then when they started working out geostratigraphy, Lyle and them, when they start realizing that there's no way that these stratigraphic layers could have happened in a single flood, utterly impossible. Hydrologic sorting does not work this way. You don't have layers of sandstone intermittent by layers of mudstone or silt, and then back to another sandstone layer again, and always with different fossils at different layers. Right. So the trilobites never appear above here, and people never appear below practically anything.
I was going to say, the farther down we go with rock layers, the older everything gets, like fossils and stuff. So the only way for their theory to make sense would be that God is trying to confuse scientists.
Yeah, God would have to be very, very deceptive. Yeah, very, very deceptive. And so, there's passages in the Bible that I like to refer to, it says, that God will send them strong delusion, but God is not a man that he should lie. And so he makes the prophets lie.
And he's not a man.
Right. And so, but he makes the prophets lie. And so there's a number of passages. I should really stitch them together and make a video about it, all the times that the ways that God lies.
That'd be a good video too.
Yeah. Because God does lie a few times. He just makes his prophets lie for him. And then he sends strong delusion, which, what the hell is that? Right. So, all these people telling me that God created the fossils to test our faith. A being who knows every decision we will ever make in advance of generations from now. He knows what all my grandchildren's what decisions they're going to make at any given moment for any reason. Yet he needs to test something because he doesn't know already.
And then they'll say, but that he wants you to be saved.
Yeah. No, this is just people wanting to pretend. They want to pretend that the universe was created for them and that they have a special purpose.
Yeah. I think people are just scared to die. That's what I think it is.
I don't get that. And I understand that probably is it for a lot of people. And I can't speak for a lot of people because I don't share the same sort of opinions on such. Yeah. I'm not afraid of being dead. It's how you get dead that can be scary.
That's a good point.
I've seen people die peacefully. I've seen, if I could go out the way my dad did, fabulous.
Yeah.
Have all of your sons, all of your ex-wives, all the people that worked with you, everybody flood into this room to tell you how wonderful you are. And then the anesthetic rolls on and you're out.
Yeah. And we have the means and ways to be comfortable in that situation nowadays where it's not as bad as it used to be hundreds and thousands of years ago,
Yeah. The cruelest thing we have about death now is legislation.
Yeah.
I live in Texas. My wife doesn't want to live in Texas. She's worried that one of us is going to get a debilitating disease, and that Texas, being so ass backwards and everything, is going to force us to suffer through it. Yeah, because there are a number of times, there's a number of situations where that something cannot be treated. There's nothing that can be done. You're going to die. You've got this long, and there's not anything anybody can do about it.
Right.
And they will make you ride that out. Now, we could just roll on a little too much anesthetic right now and you'll be out tonight while you're still lucid. But we're going to let you linger on until you forget who you are and start making passes at your daughter and other such things. When you start having hallucinations, when you totally embarrass yourself, when you financially deplete your family for their ability to, and emotionally deplete them while you're suffering through this incredible pain. We could avoid it easily, but that would be immoral. It's only moral to make you suffer and make everyone else suffer around you, knowing that we could stop this pain. We just won't because we're cruel, superstitious assholes.
Yeah, it really is. Like, it's so primitive that people are still thinking in that mindset. And yep. We got a little off topic, but that's fine because that was a fascinating subject right there. But I do want to ask you, I was going back and forth with a friend of mine, and he's a good friend of mine. He's a Christian. I love the guy, but he just doesn't want to. He doesn't want to go. He's not looking for truth. He's looking for validation for his worldview. So we talk. I try to talk to him about carbon-14 dating, and he has this famous quote from somebody that I don't know if it's Kent Hovind or whoever, that carbon dating is only like 10% true or something along those lines. I have no idea where he got that from. Don't even
a quick tip. Kent Hovind doesn't know dick about jack.
So what is carbon-14 dating?
So a living organism, carbon-14 is the only way to date, to radiometrically date an actual organism directly. But the isotope only has a half-life of like 50,000 years, if I remember correctly. So if you're, and there's certain other things that you have to remember when you're doing carbon dating. You have to have an idea of what the age is that you're working with. Right. And the analogy that I use is when you're gonna measure an ounce of something, or when you like it when you're in a chemistry lab and you have to measure this tiny little, 2 or 3 millimeters or whatever, you need to get or 2 or 3 grams, right? So you're going to use this meter for this scale. Now, it's not your bathroom scale. Your bathroom scale isn't going to measure this, right? Your bathroom scale is going to be wrong for this.
Yeah.
Right. And it's going to give you a stupid measurement. And if you, likewise, if you've probably seen the tractor trailer rigs, they have to pull over the side of the road and be weighed, right? Well, your bathroom scale damn sure ain't going to do that either. So you have to have an idea what the age is. If you try to age something, if you try to date something that's too young, you're going to get nonsense. If you try to use radiometric dating and it's too close to the end of its half-life, it's going to become unintelligible because it's outside of its effective range. So and being outside of its effective range is kind of like, it's kind of like just flooring it and rolling down the freeway as fast as you can, never shifting out of first gear. So there you have an effective power range in the engine, right? Well, the same thing with the reason we have gears is because internal combustion engines have a power range within this to that, and so if you try to go below, well, then you're lugging. You try to go too much, then you're wrapping it out.
Right.
So you have to use the same sort of common sense when you're using radiometric dating. So carbon-14 can date certain artifacts other than living things. I mean, like paper products and such. For example, the Dead Sea Scrolls. Nobody has a problem with the Dead Sea Scrolls being carbon dated to 250 BC or thereabouts.
Right. That time they had it right.
Yeah. Yeah. So carbon-14 is useful in archaeology, but is virtually useless in paleontology, because everything is much too old. Right. Much too old, orders of magnitude too old. So we use a whole lot of different means of radiometry, rubidium, strontium, and uranium, lead, and different isotopes thereof. And I think there's like 24 different types of radiometric dating that you can use in paleontology that all have very long half-lives. But there's a range of half-lives, and you can use these. You can use multiple means on the same item. So now you're not dating the fossil itself, because fossils form in sedimentary layers. You can't date a sedimentary layer because of the way it's formed. I mean, this sediment is just literally sediment filtering down. How could you possibly date that? When it comes down in tiny increments like that. What you can date is metamorphic rock. Is igneous rock. You can date lava flows, ash falls, things like that. So in all around the world, where they identified that these same geologic layers exist everywhere, the Cambrian exists all around the world. There's all these different places where you can find Cambrian rock, and if it's not exposed to the surface, dig down, you'll find it. So there are a couple of places where there's not just a couple of places. There's like a couple of dozen different places where the entire geologic column exists, but you can't see it because you're standing on the topmost layer, because the entire geologic column exists,
right?
The whole thing, which means that you have to bore down. And if you were to bore down for like a core, just imagine a cylindrical core. Now you can pull up the entire geologic column. So you have the fossils from the various ages. Now, everywhere in the world where you find Permian rock, for example, whether it's in Russia or China or West Texas or South Africa, where I was a year or two ago, there are ash falls and there are volcanic intrusions and such that you can date, and they always put the range, if I can remember right, around 250 million years to, I forget what the range is, but wow. We know that the Permian ended like 252 million years ago. to 270 or something like that. I'm just doing this off the top of my head, and I can't really remember what the outside range is for that.
Yeah.
But all of these intrusions, all of these ash layers, everything, when you date these, they always fall within those numbers. And the same thing for every other geologic layer around the world.
Yeah, that's pretty.
Now, I was on a paleontological expedition in South Africa, and two of the guys that I was working with there actually did their own radiometric dating in the lab. What they will usually do is they will take their sample, they'll box it up, and they'll send it off to MIT. And somebody will run their radiometric tests there and then send it back and say, hey, this is 263 million years old or whatever. So we've used this on every geologic layer, wherever these volcanic intrusions or ash flows have fallen all around the world, and we've established what they consistently are.
Right.
What the Carboniferous always is, what every layer of the Mesozoic era always is.
And they don't bounce around. They're all staying in a specific set of groups.
Yeah. Now there can be things that, as I said, that will throw the numbers off if you're not being sensible about it.
Right.
But as I said, they use overlapping methods to correct for that. And when you use two or three different methods on the same thing, you might get one number that's completely off, and then you have to go, tink the machine, whatever, do it again. Okay, well, now it's correct.
Right.
But it was all over the world, everybody that does it. I mean, every geologist from whatever religion, from whatever country, doesn't matter. You always get the same numbers back.
Right. Now, has there ever been like a testing done where they give a tester, I should say, a specific something to use, and they already know the age of it, but they want to see if the testing works good? Does that ever happen or no?
Well, I'm sure that there had to be some way of working out that these things happen. Yeah. I mean, I know that Kent Hovind kept trying to send stone fossils. You know what a fossil is something that was buried and over a long period, so that it wasn't predated, that it wasn't dissolved by organisms or whatever, so this is a life form that maybe that got encased in mud and insulated so that no predators and microorganisms can eat it. But then over tens of thousands of years, as it progresses, the original organic material is percolated out as minerals replace the original substance. And so what you end up with is something equivalent to a cast in stone of what that original thing is. And so Kent Hovind kept taking rocks, they're fossils, but they're made of stone now, right? And so from whatever type of deposit was occurring in the area. I mean, for example, I remember asking my kids one time when they asked me what I want for my birthday. I mean, I want a hematite trilobite. I wanted a trilobite fossil made out of hematite, but that doesn't actually happen. That can't happen. So instead they got me a pyrite ammonite.
Nice. Sounds pretty cool.
I thought so. I thought it was a clever workaround to the impossible problem I gave them.
Yeah.
But anyway, so Kent Hovind has a fossil now made of stone, and he sends it into a lab to have it carbon dated. There's no carbon.
Not carbon. I was just going to say
that. In the stone.
Now, why is he doing that? Is he trying to?
Because he's an idiot. The guy doesn't know anything. I mean, he's impressively damn dumb.
Yeah.
I mean, just stunningly stupid.
I think he gets more people to convert out of Christianity just by listening to him talk. And the more he talks about like scientific matters, the more he exposes his own himself, basically.
Yeah.
People we now live in a world where there's Google and people are just going to say, let me see if what he's talking about is true. Look it up real quick. Whoa, he's not even close. I couldn't tell you how many times that's happened to me,
Yeah. So I don't know if you've caught any of the series that I'm just finishing up now. I'm working on episode 29, which is going to be the 30th and final episode.
Irrefutable. The one, that one?
No, this one is this is based. He did a seminar in 2005.
Okay.
It was 2.5 hours of him lying more times per minute than I've ever heard anybody lie before. Like not just in a sprint, but in the marathon. I mean, he's
a true charlatan for real.
Yeah. It's just stunning how many lies he can tell in a minute. for 2 hours. It's amazing.
World record.
And all the opinionated bigotry and everything on top of that. It's the arrogance of ignorance. It's overwhelming. And it was too much for me to walk away from. I had to do this thing, even though it was a thing that he'd done 15 years ago, because he's still making all the same arguments today.
Yeah.
And so are a whole lot of other people. So people would be questioning me, why are you addressing a seminar from 15 years ago? And I'm like, well, here's where he used that same argument last week. And here's where somebody else is using that same argument today.
Yeah, you do a good job of showing those on your channel. I actually, even back when I was a Christian, I secretly liked you just because the way you present yourself. You're never emotional. You just literally just sit there and state facts, and then let the facts do the talking for itself. And it works, dude. You're doing it. You're doing it, man.
I appreciate that very much.
Yeah. But I just thought of something while you were talking about around the world is Pangea. Now, how do we know about Pangea? Seems to look like it fits like a puzzle.
Yeah.
How do we know about Pangea? How do we learn that?
Well, part of the fact that it does fit together like a puzzle, and one of the index fossils, is it Lystrosaurus? I think it's Lystrosaurus, was found in South America and Africa and basically everywhere. So when you find one species or one genus, at least, it's all over the world. There's no way that this animal could have, if South America was always where it is, and Africa is always where it is, and Australia is always where it is, then how the hell did this thing?
They don't swim.
Yeah, how did this thing get everywhere?
Right.
So there were a lot of fossils like that. They're showing the continuity of the tectonic plates, and there's a lot more geology that I don't understand well enough to explain it.
Yeah.
How they identified that a mountain range in Scotland, for example, matches the Appalachians, that they were once the same mountain range, split by a continental division.
Yeah, and it seems like the way it looks is like India is pushing into China, and it's pushing up mountains. And if you pull it back, at the rate that plates are moving, it's like so many inches or whatever centimeters per year. I have no idea. But if you actually rewinded that, you would see the puzzle pieces start to fit together slowly over time, which is, to me, that was like, that's the slam dunk. Like, now there's nothing. How do you refute that? Well, I mean, what is, I don't even think apologies even go in that direction. I don't even think they even try to go there.
Well, there was a guy that tried to refute that. He was not a professional scientist. He was a comic book artist. And he tried to argue that the Earth was inflating.
What does that mean?
Well, what he did was he cut out the continents, and he taped them all together on a balloon, and he got them all to fit. He had to jerry-rig a couple of things, but he managed to get them all to fit on one small balloon. And then when you inflate the balloon, then the oceans appear where you would expect the oceans to appear. And it was a nice demonstration.
That's actually pretty interesting.
Yeah, I mean, it was a nice demonstration for the video.
Yeah,
but it like I said, there had to be some things that were changed in some corners where it really didn't match up that way. Not the way part of it did, but not all of it.
Yeah. So now let's get into evolution. This is the big one. I always hear all the time. This is the big talking point from theists. Is there is no transitionary fossils. They don't exist. I mean, this is famous. This is video. I can't remember the guy's name.
This is kind of unfair of me, because Ray Comfort is probably the very bottom of the creationist barrel. He's the worst of the bunch. And I've listened to Kent Hovind talk. Okay, so when I say Ray Comfort is really, really stupid, I'm saying something.
Behold, the atheist's nightmare. Now, if you study a well-made banana, notice it has a point at the top for ease of entry. It's just the right shape for the human mouth. It's chewy, easy to digest, and it's even curved toward the face to make the whole process so much easier. Seriously, Kirk, the whole of creation testifies.
This guy has written a book. It's called Billions of Missing Links, in which he argues that the standard creationist trope, there are no transitional fossils. And he says it over and over again in his debate. In particular, he announces flatly that we don't understand how whales evolved. He says there are no whale transitional fossils, which of course, you know, I just sit there and rattle off a long list of them. You know, I mentioned all these things like Pakicetus and Rhodocetus and Ambulocetus and all these really cool whale fossils that are out there. And he's sitting there sort of denying them all. And then he tells me he's never heard of them before.
Said to him, there was no transitionary fossils. And then he said back to him, yes, there is. And he named off like 20 of them. And then Right Comfort response was, I've never heard of those. And he was like, I know. I can tell you never heard of them. That's just so good, dude. But so yeah, let's talk about the transitionary fossils.
One of the things that creationists do is they have to distort everything. They can't acknowledge what evolution actually is.
Right.
So we're talking about changes in populations, not individuals, over many generations, not one single lifetime. And these are incremental, cumulative, so that it's not one thing turning into a completely different, fundamentally different thing. So the creationists always say, whenever there's a new species of fruit fly or finch or whatever, they say, well, it's still a fly, or it's still a fish, or whatever, right? Well, of course it is, which is why we are still apes and birds are still dinosaurs. That's how evolution actually works. But the creationists have to create a straw man parody where a pine tree gives birth to an elephant.
I think they've said that too before.
Yeah, it has to be so bizarrely distant that the children are not even related to their parents.
Right.
And you get to a point where you have to wonder, there's no chance that the creationists read a science book and interpreted that.
Right.
That's a deliberate distortion.
Yeah.
They do not want to know what the reality is. They know what the reality is, but they want to make believe something else. So this is all pretend, literally. Jesus has a whole lot more to do with, it has a whole lot more in common with Santa Claus than he does with George Washington. Because it's literally pretend.
Yeah, it really is.
I have a bumper sticker on my truck that says God is just pretend, and it's a completely true statement.
Yeah, and you know what I noticed is, like, the people on the top, the real charlatans, they know that their audience is looking for answers, that they want that validation. They're not looking for truth. They want them to be told, yeah, Jesus is real. So they know that they have that advantage, so they can say whatever they want and not get checked on it. Yep. So they can just say, oh, evolutionists think that a duck's going to give birth to a hippo, and they'll all laugh and, oh, that's ridiculous. That's not what any evolutionist is saying, though.
Exactly. Like with Ray Comfort, he brought up this one thing where he was on the 700 Club when he said, let's pretend that I'm an evolutionist for a moment. You know, there's a big bang and life begins, because those two are not separated by 10 billion years. There's a big bang and life begins. And then he says, and then at some point, the first dog evolves. So what he's describing is an amorphous mass of meat sitting around on the ground for millions of years, suddenly grows eyes, legs, and a tail and becomes a dog, specifically a male dog, that then has to go wandering around looking for a female dog to mate with, because there had to be another lump of hamburger that turned into a female dog. Now, is there any chance that Ray Comfort is so staggeringly stupid that he thinks that's what evolution teaches at all? No. After all of the decades that he's been doing this, with everybody correcting him every day, you think really that anybody could even be that dumb?
I don't think so. I think he knows. I think it's too profitable in the position that he's in to keep going.
$4 million a year, and he has a multi-story house on the beach in Monterey, or where is it? Not Monterey. It's another coastal city, begins with an M. I can't remember. Malibu. Yeah, I think. I can't remember where he is exactly.
No idea, but probably.
But yeah, so he has a very lucrative living, and all he has to do is pretend he doesn't know anything.
Right.
Pretend not to be able to understand things, and preach at people.
And then keep telling people that there's no transitionary fossils, even though there is.
It's a foundational falsehood. The reason I wrote the book about it is because there's a handful of falsehoods that the believer cannot admit.
Right.
They will not admit that there are transitional species. It doesn't matter that you give the definition. It doesn't matter that you show all the proof. It doesn't matter that you show lists of them and show how they all fit and why they are all transitional. Because the believer is a believer. He's a make-believer. So he's going to plug his ears and close his eyes and scream, yeah, 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 I can't hear you, because he desperately needs to make believe something else.
Right. And you know what's fascinating is that for some reason, evolution sounds crazy, but a talking snake and and angels and stuff doesn't sound crazy.
There isn't a part of religion that isn't crazy. And I don't just mean Christianity. I mean all of them.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, just every, if you want to know how crazy religion is, just study one that you didn't grow up with.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
Sikhism, Islam, if you're not familiar with Muslims, just, read the Quran and just think, this is nuts. How does anybody believe this?
It really is.
You study Hinduism. If you're a Westerner and you read Hinduism, you're like, this is absolute insanity.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
But then you were raised. We were raised with these most ridiculous of all fables that all of them contradict each other. We're just supposed to ignore that.
Right. And
so the serpent in the garden was supposed to be Satan. The book never says that, by the way. And the Bible doesn't even allow that, really. But it says that the serpent in the garden, who was not described to be Satan, was cursed to crawl on his belly for all the rest of his days. And then in a story after that, we hear about the Satan character for the first time. And what's he doing?
He's a district attorney. He's in the court of L, and he's like working with God, talking about Job.
But it describes him as walking.
Right.
The story actually says he's walking.
Right.
So how could he have been the serpent?
Right.
And then in Revelations, Revelations they say it's that old serpent, right?
Right. So
but it's that old serpent with 7 heads who's standing on the beach.
Right. And you know what's funny about that is because Satan never was the serpent in the eyes of the Jews before the New Testament came around.
Yep.
The serpent was just something else. Satan was seen as like God's accuser. That's what the word means, actually. It means the accuser. And so if he got cast out of heaven on day 1 with Adam, why is he there judging Job 100 without whatever, how many years later? Where is that?
Bingo.
That doesn't make any sense at all. I thought he got cast out. No, he just came back for that one case.
You're just supposed to ignore all these contradictions.
Yeah, that's
for example, when it says that that God has no body, that God is just a spirit, you have to ignore all of the times that the Old Testament says that God walks, talks, eats, sits, turns his head, shows his backside, and cheats at wrestling.
Right. Cheats at
wrestling. There's a scene where I saw this as a cartoon. So they're presenting this story to children. And they have Abraham talking to God. And Abraham is talking to a twinkling star in the sky. But that is not the story the Bible tells.
Right.
It says 3 guys showed up at his door. He opened the door and recognized one saying, "Hey, God, how you doing?" And then the other 2 left. And they became the angels in the Sodom and Gomorrah story. So those 2 left. And so what happens when 3 guys show up to your door and 2 of them leave? So you got 1 guy there. There's a guy there. And the Bible says that Abraham drew nigh to God to tell him this or that. Well, how do you draw nigh to a twinkling star? Right? The story says that God sat down with him by a tree and they ate together.
Yeah.
But the Christian is somehow supposed to ignore that?
Well, the Christians get even more like ridiculous about it, because they changed things. Like when the Greek Bible was getting written, they changed verses to make it fit the Christian narrative. For example, Isaiah 53, that used to say in the Hebrew, it says they are the suffering servant. They're talking about the Jews that got taken by Babylon. So they changed it to he to make it sound like talking about Jesus. They changed Psalm 22 from like a lion. You did not hear me wrong. I said like a lion. They changed to they pierce his hands. That doesn't even that's not even the same thing at all.
So in the pierce his hands, he's being hunted by other people. But this was a dream, if I remember correctly.
Yeah,
the guy's dreaming that he's being hunted, but that he, not Jesus, he's being hunted by other people. They're coming at him with their hunting dogs.
Right.
piercing his hands, right? So the dogs are biting at him
Right.
like a lion.
Like a lion.
And so
It's like a lion.
what happens is, well, they said pierce hand. So the Christian says, oh, this is a prophecy. What is this segment of this sentence?
Just a little tiny piece.
Of the it's not of the whole rest of the story. It's just this part of this sentence is a prophecy. How is, in what sense is it a prophecy? Well, because Jesus had his hands pierced. Well, it says this other guy walked too. Does that mean that because this other guy walked? Does that mean that that's a prophecy? No, a prophecy is when you tell the people a thing is going to happen,
and you say specific things like a man named Jesus Christ. not his name is going to be what is it?
Oh, Emmanuel.
Emmanuel, yeah. That's not well, look, it's a prophecy for Jesus. It says Emmanuel.
Yeah. So Isaiah screwed that prophecy all up every possible way that he could, because first of all, he didn't say there was a virgin with a child. He said there was a maiden with a child. That's one of the words that was changed.
They changed. That's not one of the ones they changed. Yep.
Yeah. So and it wasn't. It had nothing to do with Jesus. So Isaiah is talking to this king who is worried about these invaders that are going to take him on, the Israelis and the Palestinians, or I think I can't remember who they were, but he's worried that he's going to be under attack, and he turns to Isaiah, and Isaiah says, "Don't worry about it. There's a maiden with child. By the time the child is old enough to choose honey over curds, you will realize that your enemies are no threat to you." That's the prophecy.
That's the true context of what was said.
Has not at all anything whatsoever to do with Jesus. It's talking about some other kid who lived and died hundreds of years before the time of Jesus.
And it wasn't even a virgin.
It wasn't even a virgin. And then when it turned out she wasn't pregnant, and Isaiah was wrong that she wasn't pregnant, he impregnated her.
That's even crazy.
Himself.
That's
so that she would become pregnant. And then he said the child's name was going to be Emmanuel, but when the child was born, he named it something else. And I can't remember. It was a ridiculous name. It was just a terrible, terrible name to get, like 5 syllables of nonsense. And then on top of all that, he still wasn't done failing this prophecy, because those enemies that he said wouldn't be a problem, they were a definite problem. They came in and killed everybody.
Everyone.
Yeah. So I mean that prophecy failed every way that it could. But what that means is that whoever wrote Matthew, I think it was, that makes the reference to Isaiah 7, where it talks about the virgin birth, that means he didn't understand what he was reading either, whoever that guy was that read that. Now, we can see that because I don't have an emotional attachment to make that be the truth, even when it's obviously a lie. But a believer will find a way to overlook that.
And there's always a way to do it. It's so easy to do. You know?
It's psychopathy. I don't get how you it doesn't say that anywhere. So there's no justification for the belief system. And the only thing that I said, I can't really make a judgment as to why these people think this way. It's just one of those things that, like, I know a whole lot of people like to watch football games, and I am in an utter loss as to why. I would rather watch the static in between channels. That's not even that's not even an exaggeration. I would prefer to watch that.
Yeah.
Than watch football. So I mean, I realize people are different. People have different motivations. People have different things that inspire them and move them. And religion just doesn't to me. It's just a bunch of made up bullshit, lies. It's stories about, I don't know, some people find interest in reading about Hercules and all that, and I just never did.
Right.
And I don't like any kind of mythology, whether it's Jesus or Hercules or whoever. It's just all made. It's the Marvel Cinematic Universe of 2,000 years ago.
I was just talking to someone about that. I said the way we'd have Marvel and DC right now, where a new writer will come on and take over and start writing new stuff. That's how it was back then, but it was scripture and they believed it.
Yep. No, if I had to choose, I would go with Marvel because DC sucks.
Yeah.
Why can't DC make a decent movie?
Yeah. Marvel and DC would be like Homer and Hesiod would be like Marvel, and then DC would be like Isaiah and Hosea and all the Jewish religion, like a whole totally different universe, but like it's just the same shit, you know?
Well, the thing is that there's no curiosity. There's no interest in finding out the truth. There is believe what I told you because I told you, and if you don't believe what I told you, I will kill you.
Right.
And I will kill your whole family. And then I will torture your everlasting soul and everyone's soul who was related to you. I will burn you over coals forever and ever and ever.
And the problem is that they teach that at such a young age, that even when somebody gets older and learns that it's not true, there's still that psychological attachment of being like, well, what if it is true? Maybe I will go to hell if I. And that's the problem. Is that these kids are way too young to be learning about if you do this, you're gonna burn in hell forever. I mean, that's like child.
It definitely is, yes.
Yeah.
And I was fortunate in that for whatever reason, again, I think different than other people, obviously. And I just never the hell thing. It just never set with me. That was the first belief I had to get rid of.
Yeah.
I was like 13, I think, when I finally realized that hell is inconsistent with God.
Yeah.
And it's such an obvious ploy. I mean, it's a stick and a carrot, and they're both such extremes with no intermediaries. You're a good and kind and charitable, loving husband and father, and you've given of yourself. You lived a saintly life. All of this, but you didn't believe this particular religion.
Right.
So you're going to be mercilessly burned and scalded and skinned alive by a God who can't see nuance, by a God who can't make the decision, well, yeah, he didn't believe, but he was a good guy. No, he can't make that decision. God can't make that. The ultimate judge can't judge things.
Ludicrous. Do you want to hear a crazy story real quick?
What's that?
My old pastor told the whole entire church, he said, this is what being saved is. He said, if I wanted to right now, I can take an AK-47 and I can shoot all of you in the crowd right now, then turn the gun on myself and kill myself, and I will wake up in heaven because I believe that Jesus Christ died for my sins. I'm saved.
If he commits suicide.
If he kills everybody and commits suicide, he's still saved because he believes in Jesus.
So, but there's two different commandments he's breaking there. And it doesn't matter.
This is Baptist. This is deep. This is not Catholic. This is his own thing. That's what he said.
So there's no consistency.
No, none. That's the thing. There's no consistency at all. Every church you go to, whether you're Calvin, whether you're Baptist or Lutheran or they all have their own different spins on it. And it's just how and the funny part is he would say other Christians are going to hell for reading the wrong Bible. If they didn't have a King James Bible, they were being damned to hell because Satan authored all the other Bibles, even the one that came before the King James. So that's how insane people still are in this day and age.
I love Pascal's wager. When people try to lob that against me, well, what if you're wrong? What if you're wrong and there is a God? Well, okay, let's say you're right, and we die, and there we are, both of us facing Allah. And whoop, you ascribed Allah, you ascribed a son to Allah, so there you go, you're in hell. Now, I'm in hell in every religion, so it doesn't really bother me. But
I always say that to them. I say, okay. So here's the big thing I don't understand. They'll say, well, no, science doesn't understand how the Big Bang happened. That doesn't mean therefore Bible. Like, how do you go from not knowing something to therefore the Bible is true? That's a giant leap right there.
Well, the beautiful thing is the way they choose this default. They say, well, science doesn't know everything. I often say that, well, yeah, but religion doesn't know anything. I mean, seriously, there's not one. Science can never. Somebody told me this just a couple of hours ago. They said that science will never be able to answer these questions. Like, religion can't answer these questions.
Right.
We're talking about matters of fact. Religion doesn't play there.
Right. And science
just makes up shit and lies about it. That's all.
Yeah, and science is not in the realm of trying to make theories about things that they don't have proof for. That's not their job. That's not. Let's look at it that way.
What you just mentioned, science, unlike religion. Okay, religion will say absolute proof, right? Absolute conviction, total. I know that I know that I know what I really don't know at all. They don't know shit, but they pretend to know. Science actually knows, yet they say that they have to work with theory. Everything is theoretical. Everything is tentative. Everything has to be based on prior evidence. Anything could potentially be disproved. There's a rule in science that you can never prove anything in the positive sense, period. That means oxygen theory that was proposed by Lavoisier in 1783 can never be proven. Oxygen.
Right. These are just things everyone agrees on. Gravity, oxygen. You're going to tell me gravity and oxygen aren't real? Of course they won't say that.
Well, there's a thing that we have to treat them as tentative in order to keep your mind open. Because when you start proclaiming absolute knowledge, well, now you've closed your mind to further correction.
Right. And now
so scientists is trying to avoid that. And the science actually knows them, but they have to use tentative language, whereas religion uses just assertions of absolute conviction, and they're completely wrong.
Right.
All the time.
And like I said, like you're saying, it's dangerous because what it does is it backs you in a corner where you have to look for validation rather than truth, because now you have to validate all this, or else everything it's like house of cards, it just falls apart. Whereas in science, by science saying we don't know everything and we're willing to change our minds if something comes along and proves us wrong, now you're looking for truth and only pure truth and nothing else. So that's the difference.
Yeah. So then we have to determine what truth is, because there's an issue there, and that comes up in the Bible too. You know, Pilate is arguing with Jesus. Well, we both have truth. What the hell does that mean? Yeah. Well, we have to have a definition that works for everybody. And the believers will say that truth is whatever it says in my magic book of fables.
Right.
That's just, I automatically believe that. It doesn't matter that it's all wrong. It doesn't matter that all of it was written by somebody who didn't know what they were talking about, and then edited and translated and changed by a whole bunch of other people who didn't know what they were talking about, so that maiden becomes virgin and a whole bunch of other shit happened in the book. And it says here that thou shalt not add to or subtract from. So let's take out 8 or 9 books from the Old Testament and then add a New Testament.
Right.
And then we'll put in the New Testament that thou shalt not add to or subtract from that. And then we'll have some other books added onto it after that.
Right.
And a few more taken away, by the way.
They even changed the 10 Commandments. The 10 Commandments aren't the same from the Hebrew Bible to the Catholic Bible. They changed a couple of them because
it was never the 10. It was never the 10 Commandments. I mean, there's 14 commandments, depending on how you interpret it. There's 14 commandments just in Exodus 20, right. And the list, although there could also be 11, depends on it's very vague. The Bible's not clear.
They don't
about
number
anything.
it. That's for sure.
Yeah. They didn't. So the list continues through Exodus 22 and 23. Finally, I think it's Exodus 24 where he comes down with the list of all the laws and all the edicts. Well, what's the difference between the laws and the edicts? And how do we know which one? Because if we just got this long ass list of 40 or so, I didn't bother to count them, but I mean, it's just all these different things. And it's hard to tell me, it's hard to even count them because the way of the ram, like I said, in Exodus 20, the reason I didn't count it is because I got one interpretation where I get 11 and I get another interpretation where I get 14.
Right.
How do we figure out which ones are actually commandments, right, or not? But then you go back in Exodus 34. And God says, because Moses broke his commandment because his own brother is building a golden calf, right? So now God commands him that he has to kill every man and his brother, except that it was his brother who made the calf. But did Moses kill his brother, the guy who made the calf, the only one who's guilty in that story? No, they killed everybody else. And then the guy who made the calf, Aron, who is supposed to be the one that Moses should have killed, ends up being the priest.
Being like the highest priest of all out of everyone.
How did that happen?
And now
the Bible's very specific about how beautiful and ordained his raiment should be. How he should have gold and jewels sewn into his dress.
Didn't they kill off all of the tribes except for like 2 of them? But then like a chapter later, all the tribes are back again.
I don't remember.
Who knows?
Because I was raised in a Mormon family, and they have a whole different 10 tribes kind of a mythology going on. So I tend to get those things confused.
Yeah,
so there's no kind of sense to it, but you're told that you have to believe it. You absolutely have to believe it, and that's what you're judged on. It has nothing to do with morality. Why does everybody think that if you're a good person or a bad person, that determines whether you're going to go to heaven or hell? It doesn't.
Nothing.
You can be the greatest, sweetest, most wonderful person in the world, but if you didn't believe the right pile of horse shit, then you're going to hell.
Right.
And you can be the most rancid bastard, but if you believe, then all sins may be forgiven if you but believe. All you have to do is believe and beg forgiveness on your deathbed, and there you go, up there playing tennis in heaven with Hitler.
Yeah. All you have to do is force yourself to believe that 2 + 2 is 5, and you're good. That's what it is.
Very much.
You have to force yourself to actually look, okay, I've never seen a miracle in my life. My parents never saw a miracle in their life. My grandma never saw a miracle in her life. So I have to say that 2,000 years ago, the miracles were just happening left and right. I have to just believe that, and then I'll go to heaven. It doesn't matter what I do.
But everybody in my family thinks they've seen miracles. So a thing that happens every day conveniently happens for them.
That's true too.
In just the right way. I mean, you know, so my dad was a construction worker, and he's working in a skyscraper in Phoenix at that time. They're building one of the tall buildings downtown, and a steel girder came off of the crane and fell. Now he's on the edge of this building, you know, and so the girder caught part of his overalls and ripped that, but it didn't take him with it. It just ripped through that part of the overall. No, of course it couldn't take him because he's not hanging his body weight out far enough for the thing to get him. So that's just absolutely normal.
Yeah,
perfectly acceptable, but that is a miracle to him.
It's subjective.
So it's a thing. Yeah. How is that a miracle? Because it's possible, and things that are possible tend to happen.
Right.
Yeah. Or if somebody has a worried feeling and they go home and they find out that something's not right. Okay, well, that's vindication. But that same person has worried feelings all the time and comes home and everything's fine over and over again. But all of those times are discounted.
Right. That's what it is. That's what it comes down to, is it becomes this very vague, my experience, my mystical experience happened. But like you're just calling it mystical experience. We're just arguing over language right now. It's a linguistics thing. It's really what it is. And it's and the same thing for salvation. It's linguistics. You saying, I believe this set of X, Y, and Z. That's it. You didn't do anything. All you just say some magic words. You know?
Yeah, so it comes down to, and I don't like to put everybody into a single category. I have a tendency of looking at things as in terms of a bell curve. But there are some things that divide fairly well into two overlapping diagrams, and there are a lot of people that in certain topics, at least, they don't want to find out what the truth is. They don't have curiosity. Their motivation is not to understand or to improve understanding, as mine is. I want to improve my understanding. That means that my information had better be accurate. And the moment that I find out that what I'm holding to is not actually supported, like the data that I'm citing was not legitimate, you don't have to prove it wrong. It's enough that it's not supported, and it's done. I've rejected it. I'm finished with that. And it's not even a choice that I make. I mean, because believers believe what they want to. They choose to believe.
Right.
And they tell me what the mental gymnastics that they can go through to cause themselves to believe anything, no matter how ridiculous.
Right.
I'm not a make-believer. I'm not a pretender. I want to understand.
And you know, there's also something that comes from there's a freedom that comes from saying, I don't know everything, and I'm willing to learn things and be corrected if I'm wrong. Just by saying that is a freedom that comes about that. It's like you don't have to be right all the time.
So I got into it with a presuppositionalist, and I've done a few times. So the presuppositionalist says that you can't know anything unless you know everything, which is ridiculous.
Yeah, it sounds ridiculous.
Okay, so and then that person says, well, I don't know everything, but I know someone who does. And then my response, this was on a live radio debate. I said, well, if you don't know everything, then you don't know anything. And how do you know that you know someone who does?
So true, dude. What do you say to that?
I don't remember. It was a long time ago, but it's all insane. I mean, yeah. I don't like to view religion as being psychopathy. I don't like to view religion as actual insanity. It's in its own category. It certainly encourages and cloaks. It encourages irrational thinking,
right? Illogical
thinking, and both of those could be considered insane on their own. And people who are insane can go through a congregation feeling perfectly normal, because they can't distinguish reality from fantasy. And that's a common issue with religious believers. But I think the real problem is that religion is more akin to addiction.
Yeah.
People who are prone to addiction are prone to religion. They have the same appeal.
Me and Derek did a whole podcast on this because we both had the same path to lead us into fundamentalism. We're both addicts.
And the people, well, you've noticed that the people who are against smoking, the most adamant anti-smokers, are the former smokers.
Yeah, yeah.
And the same thing is true of the people who are the most outspoken anti-theists. They are the former believers.
Right.
So
true. And we're going to end it on that. This has been a great talk. And I'm glad to finally meet you. I hope we can do this again soon. Everybody subscribe to AronRa. Now I got it. And I'll see you next time.